Chapter 4, Chapter 04. Suho was greatly shocked. The monster that suddenly appeared was wrapped in a pitch-black exoskeleton-like armor, and black haze flowed from its entire body. It formed into a giant ant with wings. The black smoke billowing non-stop from its body was like a shadow swaying in the light. The moment Suho saw it, certain memories passed through his mind. Was it ever in my dreams? He was so sure it was some sort of witchcraft. All kinds of ant creatures appeared in his dreams for a long time. So that's what their master looked like. But what is this? The Ant King suddenly approached Suho and knelt down on one knee. "Young master, I, Beru, have arrived now. You are now safe." "Who?" Suho's eyes widened. What does that mean? It was so huge that Suho had to look up even if it was on its knees. But Suho stood up. Before Suho could say anything, the black monster's expression changed. He discovered Suho's body, in a state of ruins, after being attacked by a giant wolf. The black monster raised its head, bursting into a storm of flesh from its entire body. "How dare you bite this precious noble body? I'll rip your mouth open!" A loud roar came out of its mouth, enough to shake the whole building. At that moment, the world turned into hell. A horrible prowess that engulfed the wolf's body. The giant wolf that had been trampled on by the black monster raised its head with courage. Then, it bit off the black monster's leg. "Doom!" The monster then looked over to the giant wolf. "You dare try to overcome me?" It boiled in rage. The black monster kicked the giant wolf quick enough and hit the latter's torso. The giant wolf bounces back helplessly as it screams. The monster again outpaced the wolf and slammed the huge one to the ground. It then grabbed the wolf's legs with both hands and torn its body into two. Black blood splattered in all directions along with a desperate scream. It was no longer a battle, just one-sided slaughter. The tyranny of a predator. The overpowering predator let out another maddening roar as it trampled the wolf's carcass. That brutal murder stiffened the entire body of the hunters who had just entered the first floor of the art museum. What the hell was that? They said it was a D-class dungeon, but what is this? Shock and awe. The building was shaking as if it would collapse at any moment. What is this? For some reason, Suho wasn't afraid of that cruel monster. Instead, it seemed like he was longing for its presence. It gave him a nostalgic feeling digging deep into his hazy memory. What's this? I feel like I remember something. Anand. What is this memory? In a faint memory, he could hear the voice of a child who liked to draw ants on a sketchbook. Who was dying. Ak. A sudden excruciating headache struck him. In the midst of this confusion, he was sure of one thing. I guess I'm still alive. Body strength, 1 out of 140. Slump. As all the tension was released from his body, Suho collapsed on the floor. "Kiik, young master, please wake up." Suho felt then, the embrace of the monster, who puts everything aside and runs to hug him urgently, is so warm. A smile formed across Suho's lips as he passed out. Ring. You have completed Quest Rescue the Victims. Number of rescued victims, 33. Your level increased. Suho had a dream. It was a dream about a newborn baby being carried on the back of an ant. The baby in the dream was laughing so much that no one knew what was making him that happy. When the baby laughed, the ant laughed too. There were always ants wherever the baby went. The ant was wearing an apron, holding the baby bottle, and feeding the baby. It was also helping the baby learn the numbers. There was also a part where the ant was taking a nap with the baby covered in a small blanket. If the ant was nowhere to be seen, the baby cried. Quickly the ant appeared and rocked the crib to soothe the baby. Then the baby stopped crying and smiled again, as if nothing had happened. The ant, wearing an apron, approached the baby with wide eyes, as if it could shed tears at any moment. "Young master, when did you grow so wonderfully?" Beru can't help but feel emotional. Then the baby suddenly grew up and stood in front of the ant in the form of a 22-year-old Suho. Beru. Beru looked at him proudly and wiped the tears. My main goal in coming here was to unseal your skills. I didn't know you'd be able to do it yourself. Whimper. He was so emotional that tears couldn't stop falling. Sniff. But that's not everything. The most important one is kept here. Beru took out something and held it in his hands. Ring. Item. Shadow Dungeon key has been obtained. Shadow Dungeon? What is that? Suho felt a strange feeling at the sudden message. But this is a dream. Beru couldn't hear him at all. The ant squeezed the key into his hand and said, "Please use this key whenever you are ready. It contains everything that should have originally belonged to you, young master." Saying that, Beru got down on one knee and grabbed Suho's shoulder with both hands. "Just keep in mind this one thing," he said in a solemn tone and friendly touch. The two eyes that felt the conflicting emotions were facing Suho. Great power requires a large vessel. When a person who is not prepared is given strength that he cannot handle, his vessel may break without enduring the weight of that force. Great power, large vessel. Suho repeated those words in his mind. It only means you would need a bigger vessel. Beru's eyes narrowed, and then he painted a mischievous smile on his face. Oops. After speaking, Beru stood up again and bowed his head respectfully. Then, young master, my mission ends here. I want to protect you more, but even at this moment, there are others who are waiting for me. Then he winked his one eye. Even if I look like this, I have great skills similar to that of a healer. What? Healer? It was the most absurd thing Suho had heard recently. I will leave now, young master. Until the day we meet again, please. Please stay healthy. Beru's faint voice gradually echoed. Wait, there's more I need to ask. Suho hurriedly called him, but no voice came out of his mouth. At that moment, he woke up. Huh? Ant? Suho jumped up and quickly looked around. White walls and the smell of disinfectant. A calm air surrounded him. Oh dear, you're awake now? The nurse who was adjusting the IV drop looked at Suho. Where? You're in the hospital, don't you remember? A dungeon appeared in your school. Weren't all those just a dream? Suho got up, but he had a blank expression for a while. From where did I start dreaming? Ant? Dungeon? Or was it leveling up? Everything was unclear to him. Just in time, the news was playing on the TV in the hospital room. 2 days ago, the gate that suddenly appeared at Korea University was almost closed down. Despite the occurrence of a dungeon break in the middle of the city, experts say that the number of casualties is miraculously small. It's been 2 days? Everything that happened in the art museum must have not been a dream. Were my dreams before real too? Suho finally remembered. His childhood memories of playing with large ants. How could he have forgotten those happy moments until now? When Suho recalled Beru, whom he had seen in his dream, he felt bummed out. We couldn't even have a proper conversation, yet he left like that. Suho raised his head. The words floating in front of him had been there all along. Quest: Rescue the victims has been accomplished. The quest completion reward has arrived. Do you want to check the reward? Yes, Suho confirmed without hesitation. He almost died several times, which he felt was unfair, but it's still right to check on it. These are the rewards that were prepared. Reward 1. Ability points +5. Reward 2. Muscle strength stat points +3. They're giving me 8 points. It was more than what he expected, so he was surprised. Apparently, every time he levels up, his stats seem to go up by 1 point. So the additional stats of 8 points were much more than leveling up once. It was worth risking my life doing good deeds after all. Suho checked the status window right away. Status window. Name: Sung Suho. Level: 3 occupation. None title. None HP 140 out of 140 MP. 14 out of 14. Stats: muscle strength 15, body strength 12, agility 12, intellect 12, senses 12, divisive ability 0.5, skills: passive skill, none, active skill, ruler's power level 1. Certainly, many features have been added compared to the ones in the dreams he had in high school. Back then, only the level was displayed and there was no status window of some sort. Which stat do I need to level up? Muscle strength stat of 3 points was applied automatically, but he was wondering where to allocate the remaining ability stats. He did not choose right away and studied the stats carefully first. An information window then popped up in front of him. Information. Muscle strength. A stat that increases strength and speed. Attack power increases. Agility. A stat that increases body vision and reaction speed. Increases reflexes and defensive rate. Body strength. A stat that increases maximum HP and recovery speed. Intellect. A stat that increases maximum MP and recovery speed. Senses. A stat that increases the sensibility of the 5 senses. Crisis detection ability increases. Looking at all this, Suho finds them equally significant. I'll think about it some more and make a decision later. After turning off the status window, Suho suddenly felt that he was thirsty. He hasn't drank water for 2 days since he passed out. Suho opened the door of the small fridge next to his bed to get some water. Clack. There was something... Huh? Suho's eyes widened. Surprisingly, Beru, who had shrunk to the size of a fist, was slicing an apple inside. Ya you! Kehehe. Beru, level 1 pawn class. Beru, whose enormous body had become very small and cute, held out an apple with a shy expression. It was shaped like a rabbit. I couldn't go back because I ran out of mana.
Suho looked at Beru with a confused expression. You left just like that and now you're saying you couldn't go back? Actually, the journey to Earth was very long and difficult. Numerous enemies stood in my way, but I had no strength to go back after ripping them apart.
Beru made excuses while looking embarrassed.
If His Majesty were by my side, my power would have been charged in an instant, but it was impossible to recharge because he was so far away from here.
Suho looked at Beru in silence. Compared to how Beru originally looked, he was far smaller now that he had run out of power. He looks like a doll. Suho picked him up with one hand. Mini Beru looks like a keychain dangling in Suho's hand. He was so light he looked like a prize from a claw machine. Beru continued to chatter while clinging to Suho's hand.
I don't know if your memory has returned. Young Master is the only heir to the great and mighty Shadow Monarch. Shadow Monarch? Who is that? Sung Jin-woo. I'm talking about your father, young master. My father? Yep.
Suho doubted his ears for a moment.
Father, the one who left home? He did not leave your house, rather, he went out into outer space. Outer space?
Seeing Suho's confused face, Beru talked in a calm voice.
Let me explain it briefly. There is a huge war going on in the universe right now.
A shadow formed from Beru's hand, made up of black energy, creating a vision. The shadow illusion turned into numerous soldiers the size of a fingernail, and more monsters attacked them. And at the center, there was a man who glowed with a particularly strong energy. Of course, the size of a nail as well.
This war is now being commanded by your great father, Sung Jin-woo.
Beru's hand then pointed at the enemies that Sung Jin-woo was blocking.
These guys are the henchmen of Itharim who came to devour our world whole. Itharim? Itharim are the gods of outer space far away from Earth.
Beru continued talking with a solemn expression.
Just vicious and tenacious these guys called Itharim are. Most of them were just cursed, but anyway, they were enemies who came to invade the Earth. So, you're saying that the demonic monsters that gushed out of the gates from 2 years ago were because of Itharim?
Suho, who was listening to the explanation, felt strange.
Both of my parents were missing. They had been reported missing a long time ago, and yet the police never found any clue. It was as if they had disappeared with no traces found, so I had given up halfway and lived on. But now they were just in outer space? It was hard to believe, but the fact that there was a stuffed doll or talking ant in front of me was also an unrealistic situation to begin with. Oh well, in a world where monsters and demons exist in dungeons, adding universe stuff into that is nothing more surprising. What about my mother? Did she also go to outer space? What, she did not? She disappeared on the same day as my father, so of course I thought she went with him. I have no idea.
Suho sighed deeply. Beru flew to Earth from outer space while the war was ongoing. The process was really tough and not an exaggeration. It was a huge thing to leave for a battlefield alone as the High Commander. He barely managed to get to Earth after overcoming the enormous military force. And now he discovers that the whereabouts of Sung Jin-woo's wife, Hae-in, were unclear. Beru was shocked.
Do you know where to find her?
Suho's mother, Hae-in, received the protection of the Shadow Monarch so she shouldn't be in danger, but what if something happened? She must have encountered forces counter to that of the Shadow Monarch's power. Beru made a fuss like that, but Suho was not very worried about his mother, Hae-in, for some reason. Of course, he was very worried at the time of her disappearance, but the shock of knowing his father's identity was so great that his mother did not look like an ordinary human anymore.
Come to think of it, I've never seen my mother become flustered ever since. After all, she decided to marry my father despite knowing his true identity.
Beru muttered something next to him, but Suho didn't hear. The kind of mother Hae-in was that Suho remembers was always a relaxed and unwavering firm person. Could that be why? It may be just a vague belief, but he couldn't imagine his mother to be in danger. Still, it was very fortunate to find a clue to his parents' disappearance, which had been an open case for so long.
Beru, what can I do to find my mother? Become strong? Yes. His Majesty cannot come to Earth for now because of the ongoing war. The only one who can save Miss Hae-in is you, young master. But right now, you are weaker than a caterpillar. Caterpillar?
Suho was a bit offended. Regardless of whether he was or not, Beru removed all the shadows he had created, escaped from Suho's hands, and soared high into the air. He pointed at Suho and chuckled. "Ring!" At that moment, a message window appeared in front of Suho's eyes. Quest Trials of the Shadow. You are the son of the great Shadow Monarch, but right now, all of your innate skills are sealed. You will have to prove your qualifications to receive that great power. Enter the Shadow Dungeon and prove your worth.
Shadow Dungeon?
The quest window unfolded before his eyes. As soon as Suho read that, he remembered the Shadow Dungeon key that Beru handed over in his dream.
The Shadow Dungeon is the realm of peace given to the young master. It is the land of the dead, where the living cannot set foot without the owner's permission. Please open inventory.
Right then, a translucent window opened in front of him. Inventory, Shadow Dungeon key, unchecked.
There's an inventory? It's totally like a real game.
It was fascinating. Accordingly, the dream he had was a tutorial, but this time all the features like the ones in a real game were added. Suho reached out and took the key. Then an information window appeared above the key. Item, Shadow Dungeon key. Obtaining difficulty. Type, key. This is the key to entering the Shadow Dungeon. Can also be used on Sung Suho's shadow.
Can be used on my shadow?
Following that explanation, Suho's gaze went down to his feet. He got down on one knee and gently held the tip of the key over his shadow. Swook. Strangely, the key went into his shadow. Beru's eyes widened.
Wait.
Suho pulled out the key again and hurriedly changed his clothes. After taking off the baggy hospital gown and slippers, he found his own clothes and put them on, then tied his shoelaces. A determined light shone in Suho's eyes, looking down at his shadow.
Great, now let's go.
Suho didn't expect much. He shoved the key back into his shadow. Clack. Yes, no.
I will enter.
After he answered, Suho's shadow spread all over the place. It began to devour everything in sight, the walls and ceilings, and even the entire hospital building. Before he knew it, Suho had arrived in a black and white world covered in shadows.
Here?
Calm stillness where no human presence could be felt. A dense forest dyed in black and white was waiting for Suho. No, it was actually a ruined city turned into a forest. The outer walls of the towering buildings were covered with moss and vines. Suho suddenly remembered a book he read as a child.
The title was it the Earth Where Mankind Disappeared?
The book was a documentary about the so-called self-purification of Earth. Roughly summarizing the contents, a city that has been neglected and unmanaged for a long time grows grass and trees, tearing down all the buildings and eventually becoming a forest. Just like this place.
It also felt like a field contaminated with manna.
In the midst of that silence, Beru, who followed Suho, flew up and made a salute.
Is this the Shadow Dungeon?
Suho looked around and felt strange. It felt like stepping into an old horror movie.
Why does it somehow feel familiar?
Like everyone else, it is impossible to keep clear memories during childhood vividly. However, the emotions and atmosphere that he felt at that time still remained deep in his heart even after he became an adult. This black and white world, which might seem very sinister to some, felt like the most warm embrace of a mother to Suho. Right there. Swoosh!
Goosebumps.
Suho's senses stat sent a warning. An axe flew from behind him.
Hick! The trial has begun! Avoid it!
Suho moved swiftly upon hearing that and immediately turned around. He kicked as much as he could. After being hit by Suho's kick, a monster tumbled unsightly to the floor. A name tag floated on top of his head like that of Beru's. Goblin Spectator, green skin. It was a hideous monster about a meter tall.
Spectator?
As soon as Suho confirmed its name, his nerves bristled.
If it was a spectator, there could be lots of them around.
Suho had already fought numerous battles in his dreams when he was a teenager. The survival instinct engraved in him moved his body.
I need to kill it because it could attract more of its kind.
Thud! Suho threw it around before it could even get up.
I know.
Quack! Suho proceeded and hit the Goblin Spectator's hand, making it drop the axe. Beru flew upwards and clapped excitedly.
Ah, so noisy.
Grab! Suho swung the axe as soon as he grabbed it. Suho cut off the goblin's head at once, but there was no time to rest. A chilling sound of wind came from behind.
I knew it, there's more of them.
Arrows were flying in the air. Suho instinctively stretched out his hand.
Ruler's power.
At that moment, a transparent hand extended from Suho's hand and caught the flying arrow. Seeing the arrow stopped in the air, Beru was so happy that he didn't know where to look. Beru exclaimed,